in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome to your creative journey. My name is Kevin Gregg.
I'm still Paul Carganilla.
Welcome to the show that is designed to help you get your creative work done. Whether you're a singer, actor, writer, dancer, I don't know, piano tinkler, what else could they be, Paul?
A real estate agent, body part model, genetic counselor, airplane repossession person, professional bridesmaid, a crime scene cleaner, a food stylist, or an ethical hacker.
Yes, no matter what you are, this is the show so that you get your creative work done. We have awesome guests that come on the show to share part of their journey as well. We have got an actor, a host, a voiceover artist. We've got just an incredibly talented man extraordinaire. Welcome to the show, Jason Palmer.
Oh, it's me. Wow. I was excited to see who this special guest was.
It's you, for God's sake. Hi, Jason. Welcome, man. We were just talking beforehand. I was trying to figure out if Jason and Paul had worked together, and you guys have, correct?
Many years ago, yeah.
Where did you guys work before? At the old Disneyland Resort?
Yeah, we worked at the Aladdin's Oasis, Aladdin and Jasmine's Storytale Adventure. We were both storytellers in that show, and
that's right.
Yeah, loved working with Jason. Such a positive.
Oh, it was great times. That was back in the times where a guy of my complexion would be hired as an Arabian storyteller named Kazoo.
That's right, man.
Diversity. It's all about.
That's it. That's it, man. Hey, we're going to jump in. Look at this, man. We got Holly's on here. Hi, Meryl. Hi, Robbie Abney. I'm so happy. That means Jillian's probably nearby and their baby, Rory. Should I say baby? I should almost say like little young man, right? Because he's just over 1 year old. 1 year? Do I say what, Paul? Would I say 1 year? He's 1 year old. Or do I say he's 1 years old? Which do you say?
Kevin, if you want to speak English, you say 1 year.
Yeah, but then we get into the whole thing of like, what is it? New Year's Day? Isn't there something about this with apostrophes?
There's an apostrophe in there.
Yeah. We could talk about New Year's, Happy New Year's, and all of that.
Happy New Year's. Okay. Listen, we're going to dive into a whole bunch of questions that I want to ask Jason tonight. But the first important question that we ask, and also, ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions throughout this live stream, please feel free to put them in the YouTube comment section. Hey, do me a favor, man. Even do them in capital letters so I can read them out. That'd be awesome.
For old man Kevin, nice and capitalized.
Oh, great. Maybe we'll skip over the voiceover part with you, Jason. Jason, what's the best thing that happened to you over the last week or so? What's been going on with you, man?
Yeah, I'm going to name two things because they're both great. One was I just got back from a backpacking trip to Kauai, where I trekked the Kowlow Trail, which was so amazing, difficult, challenging, beautiful, very life-giving. So as a creative person, I tend to need the sense of adventure and just getting out and being in nature and off the grid, which then I feel like set me up to then do a big pitch. There's a project that I'm working on, and I got to pitch it to a big entertainment company. So those are two things that happened within 1 week, and I feel like each supported the other.
I'm dealing with so many people. Paul just got back from Hawaii a couple of weeks ago too, man. It's crazy. Is this like the best? I know that the state has been saying, please don't come. Were you a little scared had you bought your tickets early, Jason, or no?
I got them a while back. Yeah. So there was a hesitation that we wouldn't be allowed in, especially when the governor's like, please don't come. But we came anyhow, because that's what we do in America. Don't tell me what I can and cannot do.
You can't stop us Californians. All right.
It's
wrong. Do what we're going to do.
My body.
For me, I felt okay with it.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think we were one of the few that did the opposite of most people. Like most people go to Hawaii and they stay in like really nice bougie resorts, probably like Paul. And they do the very tourist things. We were going to basically be in the middle of nowhere. So for me, it was like, yeah, great. We're vaccinated. We're going to behave ourselves. We'll do all the various things they require. And then we're going to arrive and then go in the backcountry where it's just us and a few other random tourists and a couple locals who like to bathe nude. So,
well, that's amazing, man. Now, is this your first backpacking trip that you've done over in Hawaii?
Yeah, so I wanted to do it. So it was about 7 years ago when I first visited. I had done just the very beginning of the trail, and you could only do the full trail if you have permits and all this stuff. And so I wanted to go for 7 years, but Kauai has been like slammed with weather stuff and mudslides and road closures and COVID. So it took 7 years, but finally made it, and it was epic.
Fantastic, man. Most memorable part of the trip, because I know that there's like a ton of stuff, but something that really stands out to you that goes, wow, that's something, man.
Yeah, for me, it was taking a full day and lounging in a hammock on the beach. Because I don't ever do that. Like when I'm home, I don't know if you guys can relate, but especially as a creative, there's a sense of like scarcity, or you always have to be doing something, or you always have to be checking emails or submitting auditions or writing. So I have a very hard time just being still. But when you've trekked 11 miles and then you have no service, and you're sitting in one of the most beautiful places in the world, it's like you string up the hammock and you just sit. For me, it was having one full day, well, more than one full day, but that one day in particular where like it's beautiful out and the waves are crashing and I'm sitting in a hammock and getting like free guava and coconuts from the trees and feeling like I'm one with nature.
Oh, I just love that so much, man. I can just, it always feels like for me, when I'm trying to do that, I feel, I've been trying to work on keeping these like Sabbaths, just Sabbath, right? Where it's just like, I leave everything alone. And I feel like I just kind of come down, and I don't even come down into the most restful part. I feel like I'm down into it. Like, I feel like I'm on the down, going down into it. And then just before I'm about to get to that moment of just like going, oh, I don't have to worry about a thing, I'm like, right back up. I'm right back up and getting into it, man.
Yep.
Was it weird for you as you were sort of, where there's a little bit of just like itching or feeling like any fear of missing out or anything like that?
Sure, but that was before the trip. So even, I don't know if you've heard people talk about like, oh, if you ever want to book something, just plan a trip. And that happened. So in planning this trip, that's when one of the big company we pitched to were like, oh, hey, let's do it this week. And I'm like, I'm going to be gone. And then there's also a voiceover gig that I had to say no to. But I think I've learned a sense of like, I've got to protect that time and space. And so even though, again, I feel like as artists, we're often living in scarcity of like, oh, I got to make sure that I'm always available. But that then becomes very overwhelming. And so I think for me that before I actually got on a plane, there was stress and there was anxiety of like, okay, can I leave? And what if I say no to this voiceover opportunity? Or what if they don't want to reschedule the pitch meeting? But lo and behold, it all worked out. The second I'm on a plane and then I arrive and then I don't have cell phone reception or email, then it's like, great. All right. Then I can totally relax. So I almost need to put myself in situations where I'm forced to be off the grid. When I have the option to still kind of like dive in and be aware, check emails and submit for auditions or write, that's when, to your point, Kevin, I tend to be like, oh, I need to do some stuff. So I purposefully now plan trips like this where I can completely get out in the middle of nowhere, somewhere beautiful, and I can just be still. And I find that after a few days of that, I come back home and I'm a lot more proactive and ready to just fire away.
What do you think that is, guys? And maybe it's the thing that gets drilled into us as actors or creatives or whatever that is. Boy, I remember working with a guy who told exactly the same story that you talked about with Hawaii. He literally got on a plane with his wife. The minute that they touched down, he heard from his agent that he booked a national commercial. He bought a ticket and went back, filmed the commercial, and then bought another ticket to go back. So he missed like 22 hours of the vacation. Now, in hindsight, that was commercials in the early 2000s. So it was something that paid tens and tens of thousands of dollars, but it's a pretty big decision. And sometimes there's these moments where we have to go, no, because I feel like just very much like the War of Art, Stephen Pressfield stuff that we've mentioned before here on this show. There's some truth to that, which is like, yeah, go ahead and try and plan something. And it's like almost immediately, it's almost like you're going to be tested, right? It's almost like a test, like, and I think that part of it's about flexing the no muscle. I think part of that's about like saying, yeah, I know that seems kind of attractive, or it feels like I might miss out on that, but I have to say no. Paul, have you ever dealt with this, man?
I've never booked anything.
Okay. Well, that's
No,
it, everybody.
I mean,
Thanks for being part of our
Plan more
show.
trips, bro.
So we're
There's
with
always
it.
FOMO, and especially now with Everly's career, it's like we're trying to plan things a couple months out, and it's just like, well, okay, well, we'll plan it knowing full well that we might not be able to go. But I think there's a huge, it's very important to be able to give yourself a moment to step away. I mean, everybody takes vacations because you need it, and I think especially for a creative person whose mind is always going and who's always thinking of the next idea, next pitch meeting, you need to unplug in order to just refresh your batteries. And I'm so jealous you went to Kauai. That's my favorite spot in the world. My favorite spot in the world is just northeast of Honolulu Bay there. But I know that trail you hiked, and that I had a really horrible experience on it because my wife made a terrible decision one time.
But whoa,
on.
you
train
cannot bury that lead. You cannot. Hold on. You're on a podcast. You're on a live stream, and you'd say that. Well, anyway, can you please talk about a version of that story?
We can talk about it later. No, so there's a trail. There's a hiking trail. It's like the first 4 miles of this trip that Jason went on. 2 miles in, there's a beach where you spend some time and then head back out. We did that 1 year, and then a couple years later, we went back. And while we were at that beach, my wife says, "Hey, why don't we go up to the waterfall, which is another 2 miles down the trail, up the trail?" And I said, we didn't pack any water, any snacks. Like we were just gonna come to the beach and then hike out. Yeah. But she's like, "Come on, let's do it." And I was like, "No." We're not doing it. And then she's like, "Fine." And then we start to hike out, and I can tell she's just like bummed we're not going to the waterfall. So I was like, "Oh, okay, let's go to the waterfall." So long story endless, it ended up being an 8-mile hike in super humid weather with no food or water. And by the end of it, like I thought I was going to fall off the edge of the cliff into the water and die.
Were you thrown up from like dehydration at all or anything like that, or no?
I wasn't throwing up, but I don't think I've ever been so outside my body than as I was at the final leg of that hike.
We encountered a couple that were on their honeymoon, and you could tell it was kind of the reverse of your situation. So it's mile like 9-ish of the 11-mile trek to Kalau, the end of the beach, basically.
Are you about to tell the story of the Perfect Getaway movie? Is this what you're about to say right now with Steve's on? And I'm just
depends on who's buying. Yeah. So it's this. We're trekking along, and my friends and I are in flip-flops, Birkenstocks / barefoot, because that's how we roll. And we get to this dicey part of the trail where one misstep and you're probably going to die because you'll just fall down the cliff at thousands of feet, and that's it. So we stumble upon this couple, and they are struggling, and the woman's like, "Yeah, we think we're going to turn around." Now this is mile 9 of 11 miles. It's like, well, that would be silly. Like, why don't you just keep going? Just one step after another, follow us. And she sees that we're wearing flip-flops. She's like, "Oh, I guess if you guys can do it, we can do it." So they follow us along, and then right around like 10.5 miles, we're drinking some water, taking a break. And they're like, "Oh man, we're so thirsty." We're like, "Well, you should drink some water." And they're like, "Well, we only have 1 liter for the 2 of us for today." And it's like, "What?" And they're like, "Well, we have 1 liter for tomorrow, 1 for today. We didn't bring any water filtration." So basically they were going to do a 22-mile hike round trip with 2 liters of water for 2 people. Not a good idea. So we're like, "Listen, drink the water. We've got water filtration. We'll filter your water." So they're like, "Oh, thank you. We're so relieved." And so she starts chugging water because she's almost dehydrated. So we get to the end, we filter some water for them. They give us some, jerky. That's usually the exchange, jerky for water. But that's the name of my new book, Jerky for Water. The Jason Palmer story. But we ended up being like, man, we might have saved their lives because they were not prepared. You could tell they didn't want to argue because they were on their honeymoon. So it was pretty wild.
I love it. Holly's in the comments saying she's being the voice of your wife. Don't you dare tell that story, Paul.
I'm sorry that the train got so far off the tracks there. But
man.
What I was saying was just, I mean, you have to give yourself the freedom and the power to step away. And I think in any line of work, whether, you're an ethical hacker or you're a creative person, you have to
professional bridesmaid.
Otherwise, you're just going to burn yourself out and life will not be fun.
I had somebody that actually reached out to me the other day and was kind of going, hey, what do you do? What do you do to stir up your creativity? And I have really found more and more the thing that you just mentioned, Paul, which is about like turning off and stepping away from stuff, because the person was reaching out to me saying like, what do you turn to for your inspiration, or what movies do you watch, or things that you read? And I had a moment where I just said, I actually sometimes just turn off everything and then just will either watch something that is totally unrelated. I'm really not a sports consumer. I love going to like live baseball games and stuff, but like I don't regularly watch stuff. Go Dodgers tomorrow. But here's like the big deal is one of my niche things. I love mini sports documentaries. They're fascinating to me. So I'll just watch something like that, which is it's for anybody that knows me personally. I really don't spend a lot of time like watching sports or consuming sports, but it's this one thing where I kind of go, oh, this is a completely different genre that I totally dig, or just trying to just do something where I'm not doing anything. We as kids, we forget this, right? Us guys on this call realize this is like, probably part of the thing that stirred us when we were younger is at times we had a lot of downtime. We had like time where we were actually bored or having to come up with stuff to be creative or figure stuff out, whether it was doing imaginative play. We were just talking about it with your daughter Everly last week, but it's sometimes something happens when you're just like still and allowing for God, the spirit, for all of that to come and to kind of give you that inspiration. I think that sometimes we're filling it up so much, not to say the communication isn't great, but I think we cram every nook and cranny with something that we don't allow us to just go, hold on, man, let the engine idle for a little bit, So there you have it. Jason, talk to us about this journey. How the heck did you become an actor? You started out in Colorado. Were you born and raised in Colorado?
Yeah. Till I was 12. So that's where I spent my younger years. Loved it. It was great. Loved growing up there. It was a very fun place, to your point of like just being able to be idle and run around. And it was totally safe and fun. And we were often on boats in the lakes and all that good stuff. And my mom, she had gotten sick. So we had heard that one of the things that could help her illness was to come out to warmer weather, and we had vacationed quite often in San Diego. So they were like, well, if warmer weather will help, let's go to San Diego. So we moved out to San Diego. And that's where I struggled, just because it was like, I don't know what to do. I was not really a big sports guy. I had sucked at sports growing up. I think it was a hand-eye coordination thing. I don't know what it was, but I was bad news. And so I was kind of new to San Diego, and my mom had suggested, she was like, hey, there's this community theater thing. And I'd always like made jokes in class and did voices and played, I always gave my toys voices and stuff. And so my mom was like, well, you should use that in community theater. So I remember auditioning for The Wizard of Oz, and I had a horrible audition for the Cowardly Lion. And I ended up getting cast as, I think it was some production where they had a witch's butler. Who knew the witch had a butler?
Wait a minute. What type of butler? You had a what?
The witches. The witch.
Oh, the witch's butler. Okay,
witch.
I thought you said like the rich's butler. It's just like
the richest butler of all.
The richest butler. So the witch's butler. So this is like the Wicked Witch of the West. Is this who this is?
Had a butler.
Has a butler in the school play. Sure.
This
And can I tell you something? You're the third person that's been on this show, that has been on some of my podcasts, that have talked about Wizard of Oz experiences. This is crazy, man. The Wizard of Oz it's crazy. All right, so go ahead. So you're the witch's butler.
And a farmhand. And so I booked that. I had a blast in doing it. I'm like, this is great. These are my people. And then the next show came along, which I had never heard of. It was called Little Abner, and I never heard of it. And so I didn't audition because I'm like, I don't know what that is. And the director called and he was like, why are you not at the audition? I'm like, I don't know what that is. And he's like, well, I can't cast you if you don't audition. So can you just sing happy birthday? Wow. So I did over the phone, and I was cast as the lead of this show.
Wow.
And then that just, so I did community theater all through high school. My high school had a horrible drama department, but doing community theater was like it was a blast. It's like where I met my high school girlfriend. It was awesome to be with adults and kids of different ages. I felt like it just taught me so much. And then in high school, I was doing student government stuff, but I was also in my classes, I would read aloud in voices. So like in Spanish, they'd be like, okay, cool, we need to read this exercise. And I'd be like, cool. Can I read it? And then they'd be like, yeah, read it as a Valley girl. And so I'd be like, nosotros vamos a la película, or whatever. And then everyone loved it. And the teacher thought it was great.
Yeah.
And so I would consistently do this. And that professor, her name was Senora Brenner. Miss Brenner, she was like, hey, have you heard of voiceover? So she recommended it. And then when I went up to college, which was Pepperdine, I knew I wanted to go there because Malibu, why not? But also because of the international programs, everything else. When I was at Pepperdine, I got blacklisted from the theater department.
Whoa, why? What did you do?
I decided to work at Disneyland. So
wait a minute. So now wait a minute. Now, wait a minute. What do you mean that they blacklisted you? Because of the fact that you were like doing the stuff so you weren't available for shows, or what was it?
Maybe. So I had been cast as a small role in Much Ado About Nothing. I was the sexton, or as I like to say, I was the sexy sexton. Okay. I was cast in this, and then I auditioned. I'd wanted to work at Disneyland, and my parents had moved from San Diego to Orange County. And I'm like, oh, that's a great summer job. I want to work at Disneyland. So I auditioned for a certain role. I got cast. And then I had to tell my director, who's also the advisor, hey, listen, I got cast at Disneyland. I'm gonna have to miss a couple rehearsals. And she's like, well, you have to choose between the show or Disney. Yeah. And I was like, well, I need the money. Everyone's expensive. Yeah. So I told her, I emailed her. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna work at Disney. And then I got an email that I wish I had saved, and it was basically, she said a trust had been breached, and I did not know how to commit. And I would not be cast in any show during my time at Pepperdine. I don't know how to take it seriously. And she was true to her word. And so for 4 years as a theater major, my advisor did not let me do a single show at Pepperdine.
Oh my
But
gosh.
That then led to, I'm still with Disney 20 years later, so I guess that was a good choice. Wow. But I then went overseas, which theater majors don't do because they usually can't because they're doing shows. Yeah. And then I did student government. So I was student body president, went overseas, did a ton during my college experience that I'm grateful for. So
can I ask you something? I just want to ask you something.
Okay.
Were there versions of, did you have versions of anger and resentment during that time period? Okay. Yeah. What have you done how did you move through that? And have you let it go? Sorry, guys, you're getting to see this intervention right live.
Curious. I think I've let it go. It took years. It's still there. So part of what's guiding me, there's a thing called the Enneagram. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it.
Yeah, sure. Actually, explain this a little bit. And before we do this too, I don't want too much room to go past without Holly's comment from before. She was just talking about she'd been doing a Bible study about the gift of Sabbath. Great quote from the study. It's actually one of the ways that the image of God shows itself in our lives when we stop in a constantly moving world. So I just wanted to call that out before we got too far away from that. Amazing stuff. So Jason, please explain an Enneagram. No, he didn't say pentagram or astrology or any of that other stuff.
Get him.
He's talking about pentagrams on this show. No, Enneagram. Describe what the Enneagram. Paul, have you heard of the Enneagram? Mm-mm. You're in for a treat. You're in for a treat, buddy, and so is the rest of our audience.
A number of my friends had talked about it years ago, and I did think it was, don't get on the comments and hate me for this, but I thought it was similar to, like, people described it like kind of horoscope stuff, which is fine if that's your thing. But I tended to be like, oh, it's one of those things where you can read it and be like, oh yeah, you're going to have a good day and someone's going to like the shirt you're wearing. Cool. But the Enneagram, it's a personality thing of sorts. So the idea is that there are 9 kind of types or traits, and that as a whole person, we are every bit of those. We're all 9. But at some point in our life, usually in our youth, we are wounded. So something has happened to us. It could be from our upbringing, a parent, a friend. But because of that wound, we then respond to our wound in a number of ways. We respond to it in a healthy way and an unhealthy way. And that tends to be our type in the Enneagram. And so there's a really phenomenal podcast about it. There's an artist called Sleeping at Last. He's a musician. And he did a study on all 9 types. And so he brings a guy on who talks about what the type means, and then he writes a song about each type. And it's a great way to learn about it, as well as a great way to determine like, oh, this is who I am. Because there's tests, but if you're depending on your type, you can actually kind of figure out how to test a certain type. So as I listened to this podcast, realized I'm what's referred to as type 3. Type 3 is performer or achiever. And there's also these wings, which are the numbers that are on either side of you. And so I'm a type 3 with a type 2 and type 4 wing. Type 2 is the helper. Type 4 is the artist. And so when you learn about them, you learn like, oh, there's a sense of woundedness and health and unhealth. So as a type 3, the performer or the achiever, my wound, which came from most likely when my biological father left, was a sense of I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy of someone's love. I'm not worthwhile. So I've got to work really hard, and I've got to be whatever version the world wants me to be or that person wants me to be in order to be accepted. So
Jason and I have got some similar types on this. We've talked a little bit about it. And even as you're talking about it, Jason, it's like, I think about the stuff that I've studied with myself. Some of my defaults of character are exactly that, like falls into like that people pleasing and just like, hey, what do you need me to be? No worries. So that really sparks for me. So sorry, I just wanted to say.
Yeah. So a nickname is the 3 is also the chameleon. And so that's what I've spent a lot of my life. Okay. What do I need to be? What version do I need to be? Who do I need to be? How do I need to achieve? Okay. I'm the guy who was student body president, have done Ironman races and marathons and all these things. And part of that came from health, but also part of that came from, if I do these things, I'll be accepted, I'll be liked. And that's been a part of my struggle as a creative, to be honest, because to your point of the resentment, when I was blacklisted, my initial reaction was, I'll show her. Once I'm famous, then she'll regret this decision. Or once I'm famous, my biological father, he'll regret walking it out on me. And so that fueled a lot of my creative goals for a long time in a very unhealthy way. And it wasn't until like I felt led spiritually to quit all my jobs. This was around 2012. And so I quit the 5 jobs I had at the time, including Disneyland. And I'd also been an international tour guide for Adventures by Disney, and was also working with celebrities at award shows and voice acting. Because I realized that at that time I was putting all my worth in achievement and in succeeding as a creative. And the problem with that was when I wasn't succeeding, I felt just down on myself and horrible and who am I? And I felt worthless. And so, I had a lot of resentment to the people who hurt me and felt like the way that I could show them. And I think a lot of comedians tend to struggle with this. It's cool. I was made fun of. I was bullied. So I am now going to do this thing. And I'll have the last laugh.
Yeah.
And so, I had.
Or they can flip it the other way. We've seen it happen with some people that they just become like, everybody's going to be the enemy, or you're never going to hurt me. I'm always going to be the one that has the upper hand in this situation.
That too. So I had to learn how to let go of that and be like, all right, like that hurt me at the time. But the biggest thing for me was over time, I saw the good of those things. Yeah. So the biggest thing for me, there's, a verse in the Bible that says that God works for the good of those God works for the good of those who love him. In other words, that like everything works for a greater good. And I feel like that's also been like kind of is now become cheesy, like, oh, it's all for a greater good. But for me, it's been actually how I've coped with a lot of the heartache that I've gone through. So I have a mom who has 12 incurable diseases. And I've had to say goodbye to her every time she's gone into surgery because she might not make it. I've had a sister who's attempted suicide. And so I've faced a lot of trauma. And the thing that's got me through it has been that promise that, okay, there's something good will come of this. And I might not see it right away. I might not see it soon, but eventually some good will come of it. And so for the Pepperdine thing, where I got blacklisted, initially I was devastated. I was bummed. I was a theater major who was now blacklisted from being in theater.
In an expensive school. School for somebody as you're doling out that cash, right?
Yeah. But then it's like, okay, cool. Well, what can I do instead? And so I feel like there's that sense of like, okay, this door was shut. Well, what can I do? I'll go overseas. I always wanted to go travel. And then, oh, cool. I was in student government in high school. So I'll do that in college. And so then I had this very well-rounded experience, which then led to me taking a voiceover workshop with the guy who's Porky the Pig. His name is Bob Bergen. I took his class. He became my mentor. And that then kind of set me in the world of animation and voiceover. So
Wow.
To answer your question, what got me to acting, it's been one of these little kind of crazy lines, but it also was, okay, cool. I had my goal of where I was going to go.
Yeah.
It didn't happen the way I thought it was going to happen. And I could have just been like, well, I guess I'll work at the Dairy Queen, which is great. If you work at Dairy Queen, God bless you. Nothing wrong with that. But instead, it was like, cool, how do I reset and kind of find a different way? And that's even where I'm at today, where I'm pursuing some things that are still creative, but they're a little bit different than what I thought I was going to pursue when I was in college.
I'm in the season, man. You know, Jason and I were just talking before we came on the air too. But you know, I've also been in this season of there's an interesting version of letting go. There's an interesting version of going, all right, God, I think I knew and I look at this every single time in my life, every single time that I thought I knew what direction that my career was going to go, exactly what I wanted to make happen. And honestly, for me, man, like every time that I have gotten so pinpoint focused on that, I may have mentioned it on the episode when Chris Utley was on here too. I remember Chris Utley sharing with me. He's one of our directors down at Disneyland who's been on the podcast before, but I remember he shared with me once this image, and I may have shared it on the show, but it's this idea of like in our life journey that we're in, it's like we're on train tracks in front of, you know, and we're on the front of a train and it's nighttime and the light just shows us a little bit of what's in front of us, right? And what ends up happening sometimes, I know that this happens for myself, it's like I see what direction the train is going in and I go, I know it. I know exactly where we're going. And it's like I jump off the train and I start running really fast ahead because I want to just get to where it is. But next thing you know, all of this is happening at night. And next thing you know, I have run out of the light and I am completely lost. I'm completely lost. I can't see where I'm going. And it's literally God saying, I need you to come on back, because I'm only going to show you this much that's here, because really that's all you can really, not in a way handle, but I think it's what we're designed to do. We're supposed to be in this moment and doing it. And believe me, man, I can get very caught up in thinking like, well, if I do this and this will lead to this and this, you know, and how many people do we know have like written the script, or they think they know exactly what it's going to be and they've got it all planned out. And, it's not how life works. And so many times in my life, I've had at least 2 or 3 major times. I remember once, man, just weeping in the middle of the day, just going, it's yours. Because I thought I know what I wanted to do. I thought I knew what direction I'm going to go. I can't do this. I can't do this without you. And I just have to just like sort of let it go and just be in that moment. And I think once I kind of get back into being in the present moment, for me, it's always about inviting God into the process with it. But also not getting so caught up in these moments where people hurt you, wound you, do any of that other stuff. Cause I've gotten lost in that too, man. I've lost probably a decade having feelings of like resentment or anger with something that happened in a creative space, and how dare they, and I'm going to operate on this side, you know, and it's just like, it's such a loss, man.
Yeah. And it's a reminder too, of knowing that person is hurting or they're struggling. So I think the moment that I was able to let go of some of that resentment was when I was student body president. I was advocating on behalf of the theater students because there was a professor we wanted to become more than an adjunct. And I sat down with the dean of students, and he was like, yeah, it's not going to happen because X, Y, Z. And the more that we talked, the more I realized that this woman who was the advisor and the head of the department was overworked and exhausted. And I feel like that conversation, I was like, oh, holy smokes. Like I was upset with this person, the decision that was made, which doesn't excuse the decision she made, but it was also like, oh, she's struggling. So we're all struggling. And I think to your point, like we can get lost in the remorse or the just the resentment of things. But it's also if we take a step back and go, I think that person's hurting. It doesn't excuse their actions or what they said. But it's also one of the things I learned as a student, when we were prepped for kind of life in Hollywood. There was a sense of like, yeah, hey, when you audition, like largely you have no control over the process, because you might be the best person in the room, but like you might look like the casting director's ex, or you might look like their friend from high school who they hate or whatever. And you're not going to get cast for that reason. So there's all these things that exist beyond you and your control. And you have to be like, all right, I can't control that. And all you can do is the best you can do.
God bless it, man. Unbelievable. So you end up getting this voiceover stuff. What's your voiceover career been like? How is that for you?
Yeah, the irony there is I went into it because I growing up hated the sound of my own voice. I don't know if you guys felt the same way. I think most people don't like the sound of
when you hear it recorded, right? It's like you think like, oh, I'm fine, and then you hear yourself on tape and go, oh my gosh, that's what I sound like.
Exactly. So that, and I think getting bullied as a kid was a part of that. And so when I would start to imitate things, again, like largely it was my toys didn't sound like the cartoons, so I started making them sound like the cartoons. And then created all these voices. My parents thought I was nuts, which is probably true. And so then it was great to put them to use. So then when I started doing voiceover, the great irony is that I went into it because I'm like, oh, cool, I want to be like the crazy German scientist, or like the very posh British, whatever. And 99.9% of the stuff I've booked has been my own voice, because apparently I sound like a teenager. So when I got into it, it's like, oh yeah, cool. No, just sound like you. I'm like, yeah, but the character is like 13. They're like, yep, great. Just do your own voice. Cool. So I've been grateful. Recently, I've gotten to do some pretty crazy characters. I do a character for a video game called League of Legends. His name is Heimerdinger. And that's the most fun I get to have, because it tends to be what I wanted to do, which is, brains, bronze, the power of silence. And he's this crazy little character. But beyond that, mostly I'm doing a version of my own voice, because I do a lot of teenager roles in anime or in whatever. So I did a Saturday morning cartoon back when there was a kids WB. To me, that was the big moment of like, oh man, to be a Saturday morning cartoon, which is not really a thing anymore.
It's so weird. I just looked at that. I looked at that the other day on YouTube, and it's like 70s and 80s cartoons, man. Like, remember what a big deal that was? It was like they used to have in the fall, for those of you that don't remember or are younger, man, when fall television came out and you get like the fall TV guide, fall preview edition, and then also the major networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, would have like these little specials that would happen on either, it would be like one Thursday night or a Friday night or something. It'd be like an hour-long preview talking about what was going to be coming out for Saturday morning stuff for the fall. And oh my gosh, I just loved it. But it doesn't exist.
Nope.
It doesn't exist anymore, man.
Yeah.
What show was that, Jason? Because I remember like either the day we met or right before we met, somebody was like, yeah, he's the voice of, what show was that?
It was Joe in Beautiful Joe.
Beautiful Joe.
I don't know if that's what they're referring to, but yeah. So I was.
What was the premise of the show?
It was based on a video game called Beautiful Joe. And it's this teenage kid whose girlfriend gets kidnapped and taken into movie land. And so Joe goes in after her. And it's all these, the typical trope movies that, the Western or the, in Italy, whatever. So he kind of goes in and he has to battle the monsters of movie land to save his girlfriend. And then he's, Captain Blue is the hero that he admires. He's always watched his movies. So Joe is the skater kid who's like, hey man, I'm Joe and my girlfriend got kidnapped. And she did go, baby. That was his voice. And it was great. So we did it for one season and we're like, this is awesome. And then the directors had done Power Rangers and all these other shows where they're like, yeah, those shows were meh. And they ended up being, they ended up lasting and like, this show's really great. And then Kids WB, the execs are like, we don't want Kids WB anymore. Get it out of here. We want the CW.
Wow, man. What an
That must have been
experience.
it, because that was like, I think you did that like a year before we met. So that
Yeah, it was right before. You're right, because it was 2006, I think, and I think I jumped into the Oasis year after that, or ish.
How's it feeling from that? Because we've all, I think that we've all had those experiences where you think like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like it's gonna totally go. I remember having years ago, I got cast for a series of it was gonna be Toyota. It was gonna be Toyota commercials. So it was like 18 Toyota commercials, and it was gonna play during NFL season. It was just like, oh my gosh, it was amazing. I worked with Gary Anthony Williams, who's a comedian that's in a bunch of stuff, and this other talented guy, Frank Noon, and it was like supposed to be like, this is it, guys, they're showing it, NFL is completely connected with this. And I remember I got the call from my agent, and I broke down in tears, because in my mind, with the timing of what it was, I thought to myself, I've just made $250,000. That's literally what I thought. And my agent was like, it couldn't happen to a better guy, we're so happy for you. Anyway, we start ending up showing up we start showing up on the set to do these things, and I start noticing like we're doing all of the commercials very, very fast, right? It's like you start kind of going, wait a minute, this isn't like a regular commercial. Like a regular commercial, when you do a 30-second spot, it's an entire day, right? We're cranking out like 4 or 5 of these a day, right? I'm like kind of going, what's going on? And they're like not focusing really much. They're like doing quick things. Anyway, it turns out that these spots were not 30-second spots. They were like these little 45-second little sponsored hits that they were doing once a week during Sunday Night Football, as like a little thing, like in between the halftime show. It was like, hey, and now for this week's Toyota NFL thing. And then they go to like a little 45-second commercial. So when it does that, the money goes way down. So it's 18 spots, right? So it was like, and it was supposed to be $250,000. It basically turned into about $18,000. Still not bad, but it was still like, and we'd have to come, you'd see a bunch of people, new actors would show up for every single spot, and they would see us going, oh man, congratulations, this must be amazing. And like, as the week went on, you went, yeah, it's not going to be that, right? It's not going to be that. So
yeah, well, and to your point, I think that's where the three of us, having worked for a theme park, you learn pretty quickly, like things come and go. And I feel like, a lot of people will either diss it or they'll whatever, but I feel like it's a great training ground for like, you just don't know. You don't know what's around the bend. And I think we saw this happen to our colleagues. Paul, I don't know if you were you, Paul, you were actually in the Aladdin musical, weren't you?
I wasn't. No.
You weren't. Okay. I didn't think so, but I didn't want to assume, but I was going to say that I think that hit people very hard, because it was
and tell people exactly what happened with that.
So there was the Aladdin Musical Spectacular, which had gone on for I think 10 years, if not more. It was the thing. People loved it, and it was a great show. And people who went to the parks, the annual pass holders, thought it was amazing, and rightfully so. It was one of the best things Disney's done. And then one day, it went away. And that's happened to, I think, a number of the shows I've been in, at least, where there's someone shows up and it's like, hey, thanks for what you've done. We're going to close this.
Yes.
And as hard as that is, I think that for me, it taught me pretty early on, everything's kind of temporary. Like there's no guarantee that you're going to keep coming back. And for a lot of the folks who did that show, it was really brutal initially. And for some probably still is. But for, I think, others, it then opened up the door to go do other things. And that's, we'll often joke that working at theme parks, I would say the same for people who do extra work or people who do stand-in work. It's what we call the golden handcuffs. And it's so close to what you want to be doing. And it can groom you for that. And it can be fun. It can be great. But at some point, you have to be very intentional. Is that what you want to do?
Correct.
Or not? And for a lot of people, they don't have that moment of intentionality. And they go like, oh, it's easy. I'm here. And then they put their worth in it and their life in it. So then when it doesn't work out, it's crushing. Versus what I've always tried to do, I don't know if it was smart, but it was always keep it at arm's length and be like, I love this. I love going to work, but I have to keep it at arm's length. That way I continue to pursue the things that I want to be doing outside of it. Mm-hmm. And if someday that turns and that changes and I want to be here full time, then I'll deal with that then. But for now, I want to be careful not to get the golden handcuffs, because for me, I always was aware that it was a good stepping stone, not my goal. So all that to say, I think that then prepared me for the moments when a cartoon goes away, or an entire network in that case went away, just because you don't know.
Yeah, I will say it's such a fine balance, right? Because you're trying to do one of two things. You're not trying to live your life in like constant fear that everything's gonna go away in a second. So you're living in this constant state of panic, because I've seen people like that over the years. And then the other side of it, with what you're talking about with these golden handcuffs jobs, which I've seen the other side of that too. Like people think like, oh, you know what? This will always be here. This will always be here, and I'll always be able to do that. Listen, man, commercials were one of those things where it's like union commercial work. It looked like, especially when I got into it in the late 90s and early 2000s, that looked like something was like, oh, you could do this for decades, right? And then stuff completely changes, like the marketplace completely changes. Or how many times do we see this over the years with people that we've known that have performed at the amusement parks, where they go, yeah, you know what, that's okay, this is a good life, I'll be able to be here and all this stuff. And to your point, Jason, things change. All of a sudden they're starting to look for different types of people, or certain shows that you thought were always going to be there just aren't, or a pandemic happens and there is none of that all of a sudden, and going, what do I do? And I think it has to be in this state of, coming back to the earlier thing that we talked about, is like, you just have to be in the present. You have to be in this moment and thinking a little bit about, what could happen. What am I trying to go for? What's my intentionality here? I think that I would say this, if your intention is to go, you know what, I just want to be comfortable, and let me just do that, I think that that's a little bit of a warning bell. I think for me
I think so too. I mean, I've run the risk of being, I don't know if we'll see if it's a risk or not, of being more adventurous. And so I haven't done the comfortable thing, because I think I'm afraid of just, again, getting trapped in the golden handcuffs. So my life's been very squirrely, and there's been a lot of weeks of like, oh, am I going to get paychecks? But it's all worked out, and it's been exciting to see the experiences and the opportunities that I've had as a result of that. So some of my favorite books, there's a book called The Alchemist, which I think does a lot with that. If anyone who's listening or watching has not read it, The Alchemist is an amazing book about that very idea of going after your quote unquote personal legend or your dreams. And again, the pros and cons that come with that, like it doesn't come without cost. So I tend to be one who tries to kind of go after a life that is with as few regrets as possible, as opposed to like, oh, cool, I just want to make a lot of money and be famous. And that's the other thing, is working with celebrities for 20 years, most of them, you can tell they're very unhappy. And so for me, thinking, oh, cool, what I need in order to prove myself and be successful and to be happy is to be this very successful actor. Well, I went and met a bunch of successful actors and found out, ooh, that doesn't seem to be, doesn't work.
I know, right?
So,
We happen to meet a lot of these people too, because you've also done work with the Emmys and the Academy Awards and all this other stuff. So you're right in the mix with these folks, right?
yeah. So you learn, and I think it's, to your point earlier, it's a matter of then what do you do with that information, and what do you want your life to look like and be like, and what does it look like to have few regrets, et cetera, et cetera. So
no, I absolutely agree with that. I really, really do.
And to your point about earlier, we talked about kind of Sabbath rest as well as even the pandemic. I think that's, I don't know about you two. I know that Paul, your daughter's career is blowing up, but for you guys, I don't know how it was with COVID, but I think for a lot of us as creatives, when everything kind of stopped, here was this thing that we all loved and found a lot of joy in, as well as I even kind of worth in some ways that are actually positive. And that went out the window for a lot of people. And I think that was very hard. And I think that some people didn't fully deal with the repercussions of that. And I think others then took it and were like, okay, what can I do in this season? What can I do while I wait? And I think it's a big lesson for me too, is what do we do when we can't do the things we love, or when we're in a period of waiting? And you can either just sit around and complain and write nasty things on Facebook, or you can actually use that time, hopefully beneficially, which I think I saw both of you guys do over the course of the last year and a half.
Now, I'm wondering if you're going to be willing to share this or not, Jason. So buckle up. I'm going to set you up. And if you want to answer it, you're more than welcome to or not. So I have gone through this season where all of a sudden the things that you want, the things that you think are going to be there. And I've gone through this a number of times. When I originally left Disney as a performer and did the leap off into becoming a freelancer, and there was no freelancing work right away. And you just go, oh, nuts. Like there's nothing. Like I've walked away from all of it. I've walked away from medical and dental and all that other safety and stuff that I was given, all that stuff. And now I've got nothing. And I had a moment where I had to go, okay, I am going to pick up some shifts at the Wiltern Theater as an usher. So I'm going to do that, right? I'm going to do that for minimum wage, and I'm going to show up and I'm going to do that. We had a little bit of that during this pandemic as well, where it was like all of a sudden it was like all of my freelance work and everything I had and some other stuff like went away. And I had a little bit of unemployment and stuff that was there through another organization I work with. But then I went, I guess I'm going to start doing DoorDash for a little bit and see what happens with that. Right. We had RC Ormond, who was on here just a while back during the pandemic, who you worked with. I worked with you guys on a Star Wars project. By the way, two incredibly talented gentlemen. I can't tell you how much RC and Jason saved my bacon. You're more than welcome to rake me over the coals on this for this, Jason. So please, I'm leaving a parking space for that. But RC was on and was also talking about, like, he was at a point going, okay, I've got no work and I guess I'm doing Amazon delivery. How do I do this? And doing that stuff. Do you care to share?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, I was in that boat. So I was fortunate in the sense that Disney was kind enough to continually pay for my master's, which is great. So I did take advantage of that. Which I wrote my thesis on the benefits of improv in organizational leadership, which was quite fun. But I was like, great, I finished that. Now what do I do? And I wasn't the type that just wanted to sit around collecting unemployment, as nice as that was. I'm also, again, we talked about scarcity earlier, the type that's like, well, that might run out. And I also just want to be doing something. So I took a job at the local REI. So I'm an active guy, love hiking, love camping. So I shop there often. I'm like, well, that could be kind of nice. And for 20 years, I have driven from Santa Monica to Disneyland, which is in Anaheim, for those who don't know, in case people, where is this Disneyland? Anaheim, that's where it is. I would do the drive. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to take a part-time job, I want to bike there. So it's less than 2 miles down the road. And so, yeah, to your point, I took a job. It was very humbling because I was like, well, I've just finished grad school. Yeah. And I had been working with celebrities and doing all these great, amazing things that pay a certain amount of money. And it's like, well, now I'm working in retail. Now, that said, it also was very life-giving. Like the people I've met there have been awesome. It's actually been a blast. I've really enjoyed it, but there were moments of humility of like, man, I'm at a certain age and I'm working retail. But I will say that, again, as an actor, it's like, oh man, just the amount of material that exists when you're working retail, much like working at a theme park. The people you meet and interact with.
What were they? Any highlight types that you meet that you could give some broad strokes?
We get a mix. In Santa Monica, we get the two extremes. So we get the folks that come in stealing items so that they can have a more comfortable evening on the streets.
Okay.
And then we get the people like just the other day, who a gentleman was needing frantically some things because he had a trip to Iceland and his private jet. And it was $50,000 a night in Iceland, but he didn't know what they were going to provide. And the jet was going to take him to the safari, but who knows what they're going to have at the safari. I mean, they could fly things in, but they still needed some more. And so we get those extremes. So we get this guy who's Mr. $50,000 a night private jet guy who just demands all my attention, as well as, you know.
Now, how much did he spend? He spent
over $500, probably.
Okay.
He could have spent more, but then the funny thing too is we also encourage people, if they're not already part of the co-op that REI is, to join. It's $20 for a lifetime, and he's like, I don't know, $20. And we're like,
I'll tell
Okay,
you.
Mr. $50,000 a night private jet guy. Really?
I'm gonna tell you. I used
Uh-huh.
to in Los Angeles on Santa Monica, right near where the Mormon temple is and all that stuff. So there used to be a Pier 1 Imports that was right on Santa Monica, right? So Santa Monica. So I worked there for a few years, and I will tell you, every time that I worked there, whenever you saw somebody that pulled up in a Mercedes or a Rolls Royce, you knew that they were going to be the cheapest people ever. They would show up and they would.
Is this podcast supported by Mercedes and Rolls Royce? Is that your guys' sponsor?
They just, oh my, I knew it. Like they would roll up in the, and you knew because we were Beverly Hills adjacent, right? But I will tell you what, man, they would come in and they wanted the discount or whatever the stuff was. And you just kind of go, you know what, man? I don't get this, man. I'm barely putting enough gas in my car to get this. And you're giving me such a hard deal for this.
But to the point of like, doing the jobs that are humbling. I don't know how many stories did we read about like the Harrison Fords or was it Stifler or whatever that worked at like some odd job. Like there's all these people who like they were discovered working at Home Depot or whatever, and it's like no, they didn't come out of nowhere. They weren't discovered there. They were just having to make ends meet, and then things just eventually worked out. So
I think there's just something about like a work ethic, right? Like, listen, we got a comment here from Holly, which is like, some people are still trying to deal with the work not coming back and what's next, right? Like people are still trying to deal with this. Now, there's something to be said about work ethic with all this.
Oh, you should put your fake glasses back on.
I know.
Make sure you can see okay.
It's like,
I'm more curious about when Paul puts the glasses on and takes them off.
He puts them on as soon as he sees me put them on and off. It's like having my kid brother on the show. It's oh boy, here we go. All right, I might as well put it on too. All right, now the work ethic. Here's the situation. I'm not going to start doing. We start doing this, the audio podcast people are going to go, what are they doing? What is this all about? You'll have to see the YouTube feed. This is like, what is it? Now we start playing like, one person's hand on their cheek, the other person on their nose. You know what I mean?
Stand, sit, bend.
That's it. Stand, sit, bend. Here's the thing. So, oh, great. Now Holly's put on glasses emoji in the comments. Good gravy. I'm sorry for our audio podcast listeners who are not having any visual reference to what's happening here.
Speaking of work ethic, discipline.
I know. The work ethic. I always thought this. I thought it would be great, because sometimes people get so identified with what they do, or I'd see this a lot at Disney, right? And you probably see this in other parts of the entertainment industry. Don't you know who I am, right? Don't you know who I am? And again, going back to our earlier conversation, is people that are hurting, right? What they're really saying is, don't you know who I am? It's like, do you know who I am? Because I don't know who I am. Or please, somebody respect me, do this stuff. I always thought it would be kind of, if I was king down at Disney, be bad news. There'd be so many people hate me. They would hate me, because you know what I probably do with a lot of our performers, like a lot of our performers that kind of get caught up in this stuff, whatever. I would have a mandatory 2 weeks every year where they get to go, guess what? Don't worry. You keep your hours, you keep your rate, you keep all that stuff. And for 2 weeks, you get to work in foods, or for 2 weeks, you get to work in janitorial staff, and to just have this thing of just like, hey man, here's what other people are doing to make a living on this. Super grateful for what we get to do, right?
I'll say it. I'm sure you experience this at the Wiltern and DoorDash. There's moments where we used to complain backstage with our roles at Disney of like, oh, could we just have a show off? It's so whatever. And we'd have we'd complain and we'd get, 20, 30-minute breaks every hour, and we'd still be complaining. And then now, like working retail, it's like you get 2 15 minutes and a 30-minute lunch. And you're just like,
it, dude.
Where's the comfortable chair that I'm supposed to sit in. And it's funny, you realize, like, oh boy, we had it pretty nice, and we were complaining. So anyway.
We'll have to do. I'm gonna just tell one out of school story. I will not reveal what the shows were, but I will say that we had this is probably about 7 or 8 years ago. We get wildfire season that comes down to Southern California. It usually happens during the fall. But there was once several years ago, bad enough fires that were down in the Orange County, Anaheim area that there was like literally ash that was coming down. I remember it was at a time where we were doing laughing stock like outside. We were doing like laughing stock outside, and we were doing sets, and you're literally doing sets, and it looks like snow, like it's ash is coming down. And we got word later that one of the major shows that was inside an air-conditioned full venue complained in order to say, we can't do the show. It's unsafe for us. They shut down an entire show while they were in an air-conditioned, filtered venue while we were out performing in snow ash. So
perfect.
Anyway, that's just what it is.
Just like, one of the points that we're kind of touching on is no matter where you are in your creative journey or in your career, we're always looking ahead and looking up and looking at our goal and our dream. And sometimes we forget to look around and look backwards and see. I used to remind myself all the time, anytime I had one of those days where it's like, could we just have a show off? Oh my God, it's 88 degrees. Could we please just... And I think about like going to the auditions for these shows and how many people showed up wanting this job. Yeah. And I would remind myself of that as often as I could. But whether it's a theme park job or, a voiceover or a movie or whatever you do creatively, like, we can't get caught up in just laser focused on our dreams to the point where we can't recognize how far along we've come and how cool it is that we are where we are.
So true, man. Just staying in a continual state of attitude. And I do think that I think that you have to set personal betterment for yourself, right? Like, how am I becoming a better performer, or what am I doing to excel the best that I can in this position that I'm in now? And go ahead.
And why do we do it? That's what I think is cool. It's been cool to watch everybody's journey as well, but it's like it's kids. Like, I think for a lot of us, it's as simple as that. Like, we just want to play. And I think that as we become adults, and especially as artists, we tend to feel like it becomes this kind of highfalutin version of like, oh, like, it's not just play, I must create and do this. And that's true. Like, we advance, we grow, we mature, but at the end of the day, it's, at least for me, it's play. I want to play. I want to create. I want to use my imagination. I think that's why I love improv, is because I feel like, and people would often say like, well, I'm not funny, so I can't do improv. It's like, well, it has nothing to do with how funny you are. It's creating. It's what we talked about earlier. It's being bored enough to just have ideas and just to throw things out there. And for me, I think that's what I've tried to guard. And that's where I try to be careful in my journey as well, of like, cool, am I becoming something other than that? Like, I want to be childlike. I don't want to be childish, but I want to be childlike in the sense of I'm still creating, I'm still playing, I'm having fun in the way that I would argue, I think we're all supposed to be doing well into our adult years. But I think we lose it because we feel like we hear, don't be childish, don't be silly, don't be whatever. And it's like, why not? Like, if we think about some of the comedians we admire or some of the artists that are incredible, it's because they're being very childlike and they're creating and doing whimsical, fun things. And so I think sometimes you have to pause and be like, why am I doing this? Why do I want to be creative? Is it because I'm trying to prove myself? Is it because there's a certain art form I'm trying to crack? Or is it just simply because I enjoy it? And then the question then is, well, do I still enjoy it? Why or why not?
Yeah. Greatest set of questions to be able to just ask yourself, to just check in and to say, what is this I'm doing now? Jason, I'm going to end with this general question. You're branching out a little bit. You're branching out into new territories for yourself. Now, part of this is about, you mentioned at the top of the show, which is about pitching some ideas and pitching some show stuff without getting too specific into it. What has this process been like? Because it's a relatively new muscle that you're flexing. Yes. So
Yeah.
what's this like for you?
Yeah, it's tricky. So again, coming from an experience of being an actor who's just auditioning and trying and desperately hoping the right perfect role will come along. I think a few years ago, there was a sense of like, yeah, I can keep hoping and praying that the right thing will come and that the stars will align and I will get the audition and the person will hear my audition and it'll be good enough and I'll book it and then yay. It's like, well, and that may or may not happen. But I've also been the type that's like, all right, well, what can I do outside of that? And so part of that has been, okay, what ideas do I have? What experiences do I have? And so in the last year and a half, it's been kind of taking experiences, know-how, some thought, and kind of creating a concept or a show that I would not only want to then host, but would also want to be a showrunner and executive producer on. And so that has taken this other skill set where instead of just being someone who shows up and is trying to audition for something, it is now okay, why should the show get made? How does it get made? What's all the little pieces about it? And it's all those little nuanced pieces that I think, executives and writers and directors and producers are all considering and trying to be like, okay, why should this idea then get made? So it's lengthy and difficult. And I feel like this last week I had what felt like an audition and an interview all wrapped into one.
Yep.
And it's terrifying, but it also is exciting. And I referred to the book, The Alchemist, which has some great passages that kind of resonated with me this week, as well as one of my favorite quotes by Theodore Roosevelt. It's been used in a number of books, but it's this daring greatly quote. And it's a sense of like, it's better to be the one in the arena as opposed to the critic in the stands who sits there with their arms crossed. That's so right. I'm learning a little bit right now what it looks like to be like, all right, well, I can continue to sit on the sidelines and shake my fist and be like, why didn't they do this? Or this would be a good idea and missed opportunity. Or I can go, all right, well, here's an idea and I might completely fall on my face. It may not work, but I got to try. So that's where I'm at now is trying to get it into the right doors. And I will say that's one of the hardest aspects of Hollywood. It's one thing. There's another great book called The Artist's Way, which I am a huge fan of. If you're a creative person, even if you don't think you're creative, go through the book. It's a 12-week study. And
by Julia Cameron, by the way,
right.
For anybody that hasn't heard that, by Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
And that author mentioned a line that hit me this last year when I read it, which was, it's not often the most talented who are successful, it's the most audacious. And I, as a creative, have always struggled because I don't have a lot of confidence. I always go into auditions and I kind of flail or get back to my woundedness, go like, I don't know if I'm good enough and what will they think? And people will be like, oh, you're very funny, you're talented. I just have a hard time receiving it. But this idea is probably the first time where I've been like, I feel like I can be audacious. In other words, bold about it. Like I feel like it's a good enough idea. So as a creative, it's been really great to surround myself with other people. I find myself to be a collaborative creative. I struggle when I'm just alone in something, but having other people work with me and go, yeah, this is good, helps me realize this is a good idea. And that has then set me up to be a bit more audacious and go, all right, let's shoot for the moon and see what happens. So I don't know what will happen with it, but it's exciting and fun and quite the adventure regardless.
I'm so proud of you, buddy. I can't wait. And I do have to give this shout out to Jason. I mentioned it earlier. Two things that come to mind with Jason Palmer. He and I have been friends for a number of years here. I'm so grateful for the conversations and stuff we've had over the years. 2 times when Jason Palmer has saved my bacon. One of them has been working on a Star Wars project before Galaxy's Edge came out. We talked a little bit about RC Ormond was on here. These 2 guys were so essential and key, and so was Jenny Thurman as well. These were these people that just like saved my bacon because they were thrown tons and tons and tons of material and dialogue that we were receiving from higher up executives and Lucasfilm and all this stuff. And these guys just handled it like pros. And I just cannot thank you enough. You made my job easier and you made me look good, but that wouldn't have happened without your talent, man. If I could have replicated you guys, hundreds of times over, I absolutely would have done that. It was amazing. Isaac Robinson was a part of that as well too. Just really helping out. But and then also Jason and I had a great opportunity probably around that same time, within a couple of months. We got to do this thing for some Disney travel stuff, but it was it was so fun. Jason and I actually got to create characters like based off of stuff that Jason has done. We were able to write, create, and like just take a low budget camera film with another guy and just we filmed stuff in the park. It was like one of my most fulfilling creative, just like, it's so funny because I say at Disney, it's just like literally like the lower the budget is, the less they leave you alone, right? That was definitely amazing. So
well, that's right. I got to be Norm. Yeah, Norm from North Dakota.
so good. I wish I could. Well, you show that in some circles. I will, but I will tell you, man, it was so good, so good. I've got Holly saying this stuff too, which is like, way to go, Jason. Step out in confidence and let the universe surprise you. This podcast reminds me of the good old days and awesome break room conversations. Thanks, Holly. Those are fun stuff.
Good.
You're a rock star, Jason Palmer. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for coming on the show, and congrats. I'm excited to see where all the scary stuff takes you, man. I agree with a lot of what you said, especially the about stepping out and taking risks and stepping outside your comfort zone and stepping up to the plate, really, because a lot of people just get frozen in the fear, and we've talked about that a lot on this podcast. But just having the courage to just take the leap and let God. I'm very excited to see where it all takes you.
Thanks, guys. Well, and I feel like the two of you have done a great job of that, not only with this podcast, but the way that you all still find opportunities. I feel like the two of you have not been the type to be like, well, what are we going to do? We'll wait and see, wait until someone comes knocking on the door. And I feel like the two of you are consistently looking for side things or how to push yourself, how to grow. And I don't know, I think it's good to recognize and to see that other people are doing that very thing. It's also rare. I don't know if we realize that. Like, I think we have a handful of friends that are all kind of in that same boat, but then there's a lot of people that don't. They just want to wait on the couch and they're hoping that the heavens will open and the right thing will plop in their lap. But kudos to you guys for continually finding opportunities to create and try and do and experiment, even when it's humble jobs.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. I would say that's the one thing I want to leave our audience with tonight. If you're happening to listen and you feel like you're stuck, it's part of what the show is about. Just take a step. Just take one step in a direction, just whether it's writing or just doing something. But I think to Jason's point, it's just not really about like sitting around and hoping and waiting or even being filled with fear. It's like, you just got to get up and go. And sometimes the path isn't exactly clear, but it's about taking that first step. So
yeah,
Jason Palmer, awesome to have you on the show. What's coming up for you soon? We'll give you the final thing to let us know you got cast on something that's coming up, right? What people see on tour.
That's right. I was just cast as Boss Elf. That's right, Boss Elf in Rudolph the Musical. This actually happened right the night I was leaving for Kauai, where I was going to be off the grid. I got an offer and I had to tell a manager, figure it out. And if you think it's good, then sign on my behalf. And I came back and apparently I'm going to be in a show now. So yeah, I will be touring, it looks like mostly the Midwest and East Coast, mid-November through the end of December. And if you don't remember who Boss Elf is, if you've watched the claymation, he's the one who doesn't understand why Herbie wants to be a dentist. He's the one who's like, a dentist?
Yes.
Well, elves go ho-ho and hee-hee and things like that. So that's...
Well, if you happen to be listening to the show, and we do have a number of listeners that are in different parts of the country, if you know that Rudolph is coming through your town, shake that guy down. Shake him down.
Shake him
Say,
down.
hey, can you get me a deal at REI? I hear.
I will say I went from like working at a place where everyone's like, can you get me in for free? I haven't talked to you in 10 years, but can you get me in the park for free? To now like, oh, I haven't seen you in 5 years, but can you get me a backpack?
Oh gosh. Why is it, guys? Why is it? I don't know why people do that. I don't know why.
Congrats on the new role, man. That's
Thanks. I look forward to it. It was, and to one of the things we talked about, it's a little bit of like the should I, shouldn't I? I don't know what. I don't know if you guys ever feel this way, but sometimes it's as frightening to say yes to something as it is to say no. But it's like, you know what? It's 6 to 8 weeks, and I think it's going to be a blast. And I don't have a whole lot going on otherwise, so let's go do it and have some fun. So
that'll be good, man. Awesome, Jason Palmer. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Gentlemen, I appreciate it.
You bet it.
Thank you.
Hey, Paulie, how can people support us?
Yeah, Paul.
You'd like for us to appreciate you.
Paulie.
Like a JFK? That kind of sounds.
Leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this podcast, or whatever podcast venue or setup you've got going on there.
Are there podcast venues?
Yeah, there are.
Yes, that's right. I don't know.
Platforms, okay. Podcast platform you use.
Yeah, there's platforms.
Well, we're gonna edit you out of this whole show, Jason.
Probably should.
It's just gonna be Paul and I saying hello and goodbye.
Your positive review will help people who enjoy things like this find things like this, and hopefully this thing.
Amen, man. So good. Thanks to all of our listeners. We will be back. You can always find past episodes of Your Creative Journey on yourcreativejourneypodcast.com. And also, if you're watching us here on YouTube and you like the show, please like and subscribe and share it with friends so that we can help just increase the viewership. And as always, if you want to see some amazing acts and performances and stuff, head on over to audacitynetwork.com. I'm laughing because we got to share this quick story. What the heck happened with Noah this last weekend, buddy? This is crazy. Didn't you guys do like a Polly's picnic and all of a sudden he was going to do Purple People Eater? Was this you?
Oh, that was so the weekend before last. Yeah, we've never been blocked. We've never had a show blocked by a music company. We've done hundreds and hundreds of shows. There's been thousands of cover songs performed live on our shows. And like I said in my post, like the most a music company will do is just like attach themselves so they get part of the ad revenue from the videos. But Universal Music Group flat out blocked it from a 4-hour show from ever being streamed again or viewed again because Noah sang Purple People Eater. And
that's where they draw the line.
Can you believe that? And was it the first time Noah sang on the show? Or yeah, I mean, he sung a couple of other things.
No, he sings like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Yeah.
But like, my 3-year-old boy took
it's
down.
It's 3 years old.
Yeah, 3 years old.
If it's many years, then it's plural years.
Took down our show.
I'm so sorry. I just had to tell that story. I saw you post that the other day. It is insane, isn't it? It's an insane world that we live in with blocking and revenue. And anyway, regardless, I go over to audacitynetwork.com. They've got some great stuff. Maybe someday they'll let Noah sing again.
I mean, that's the birth of a great sketch right there. It's like feds showing up at your house, arresting the 3-year-old.
On the floor.
Get them, boys, get them. Rating things. Shut this down.
Anyway, check out audacitynetwork.com. There's some amazing stuff that's over there. That's it, everybody. We're going to say goodbye to everybody. Jason, thank you. Paul, thank you. Love you guys. And thanks to all of our amazing audience members that were here tonight. We just so grateful for you guys.
And thank you, Steve Erdeman.
Oh, that's right. Steve, you're a rock star. Thank you for doing your editing. You're amazing. All right, guys, that is it. Adios. We'll see you in a few weeks for our next guest. Bye, everybody. Have a good night, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Closing her down.